Did y'all know Haile Selassie abolished slavery in 1942 in Ethiopia? Following the end of the Italian colonial regime, Haile Selassie 1942 law finally abolished slavery in Ethiopia. Here is also a great article explaining Ethiopians' perspective on slavery that happened in Ethiopia. Safi, who lives in Dabu, Ethiopia, explains how they are hiding the story of slavery because they feel ashamed. She explains how it is seen as a closed subject because people don't want to talk about it. She said in her 50s she was told about trade by older relatives and heard different stories that slave owners owned entire households as slaves and would sell whole families to buyers, including the children. Kaya Kazayagni, an assistant professor in Addis Ababa University, explains how Ethiopians tend to ignore certain kinds of history that would shape the negative image of the country. She also mentions how Ethiopians were taught to be proud of their identity, and bringing this narrative of slavery will be a challenge to that discourse. Yet slavery was once widespread in Ethiopia. Stretching back centuries, slaves served as soldiers, domestic servants, and laborers who were put to work at royal courts, in churches, and fields. Many were born into servitude. Others were captured in raids and during wars, or sold into slavery after they failed to pay debts. Much of the trade was domestic, although Ethiopian slaves were also sold across the Red Sea to Arabia and Turkey, where they were prized as concubines and servants. Hamid, a professor of history at Addis Ababa University, explains how historical data on the slave trade is patchy. He also explains during times of war, estimates up to 1/3 of Ethiopians were enslaved at different points in history. Ahmed also says slavery was everywhere. It was the backbone of labor. It was the source of everything. It was not only landlords and the courts of the emperor keeping slaves, but also rich peasants. If you had money, you had them. Abolition came slowly, the result of external and internal reality. The first big step came in 1923 when Haile Selassie signed an accord promising to end slavery to gain admittance to the League of Nations, although the practice was not stamped out entirely. In 1942, after Ethiopia's liberation from Italian occupation, Haile Selassie issued the decree abolishing slavery. Many Ethiopians don't talk about these topics because of the lies told about slavery in Ethiopia. Because the same thing that happened to their African brothers happened to them. And this is the disconnect.